Many people recovering from an eating disorder struggle with their need to count calories, a fixation that can spiral them back into their illness. Imagine a pantry where all the food is marked up. Boxes are scribbled on, nutrition labels X'd out. No way to see the amount of calories in a cup of cereal compared to the bag of chips above it. Many of those in recovery don't have to imagine that. They can simply walk into their kitchen and see the reality of what recovery looks like.
Even if you're one of those people who has a deeply ingrained anxiety about eating, anxiety about body image, even if it stays for your life, you can learn the skills you need to be able to manage it better.
That's Dr. Kimberly OBrien, a licensed independent clinical social worker and a part of Boston Children's Hospital Female Athlete Program. She says anyone can develop an eating disorder, and the 2020 lockdown helped prove it. The lockdown inspired many people to begin a fitness journey, a path that filled up O'Brien's clinical practice.
What we saw in the beginning was a lot of no one could do anything in the beginning in March of 2020, and so people kind of put all their energy and time into getting fit, into making changes to their body. And at first it felt more healthy to them, like just to feel better, and then it kind of took a life of its own, where there was a lot of TikTok influences at the time too, a lot of things like what I eat in a day and things like that, where people would look at those and it would influence them even more to eat as little as they could and to exercise as much as they could.
Julia Maple fell into that category. The beginning of the pandemic brought a lot of uncertainty and sparked a roller coaster of events where most of us were just along for the ride without any control. So as stay-at-home orders rolled in, Maple started what she thought would be a healthy habit.
I know that I for sure fell into the trap of going on social media and seeing all of the, influencers who just look so great and all of the girls who look so small, their waists are so small. I just wanted to look like that. So I just fell into the trap of carbs are bad, fat is bad, calories, let's just restrict our calories and not eat anything, let's skip meals, that's how I'm going to lose weight. It really got really bad for me. I was severely underweight for probably, for 9 months, maybe almost a year.
There's so much of, social media influence on this that we're seeing a lot of girls seeing how they feel they should look, a lot of comparisons they're making not only to other people, but also to earlier versions of themselves because they have this constant feedback that they have on, their Instagram or Snapchat pictures or anything like that, TikTok, where they can constantly look back and see better versions of themselves in their minds.
O'Brien says in order to lose the weight, many people turn to fitness and diet apps like MyFitnessPal, a free calorie counter that calculates how much a user can eat based on how much weight the user wants to lose. These types of apps can be a helpful guide for tracking food, but the line between tracking and obsessing gets blurred with many users. A study published in the journal Eating Behaviors has found that 75% of its participants with eating disorders used MyFitnessPal, and 73% say the app contributed to their eating disorder.
For so many of the athletes we work with in the female athlete program, that's how things start. And that's how things get worse because now some people, it's a good app for them. I'm not saying it's a horrible app for everybody, but what that app does is it has you track your calories to a point where you're getting so rigid about what you're putting in and the exercise that you're doing that if you're an anxious person to start or if you're somebody who is very rigid about if control of eating is a big issue for you, that app is just going to feed into this to a point where you're going to become so obsessed about it, or I shouldn't say you will, but you could become so obsessed with it that you may keep trying to go lower on your calorie intake and keep trying to go higher. And it becomes this cycle where we've seen a lot of athletes really feel like they're not good enough if they're not going lower. And this is a really dangerous pattern to go in, which is really exacerbated by this app at their fingertips, making them focus on it so much.
Most of O'Brien's clients are in high school and college. Her youngest, however, is a 10-year-old girl. For all of them, fitness and healthy eating can be a slippery slope. O'Brien's colleague at the Boston Children's Hospital Female Athlete Program, Dr. Miriam Rowan, is a clinical psychologist as well as an instructor at Harvard Medical School. She says athletes are extremely vulnerable to eating disorders.
Oftentimes the training is so intensive that athletes can, without knowing it, fall into a category of what we call relative energy deficiency syndrome, right, where they're just not consuming enough relative to what they're expending over a long period of time. And this isn't necessarily an eating disorder, right? It can be combined or it can be comorbid with an eating disorder.
Meaning the athlete could be dealing with multiple conditions at once. It can start out as something small, the need to perform better or run faster. Maybe you just want to get in shape, and social media says eat less food. So why not track what you eat? Sounds easy, even practical, right?
But what happened was it turned from that into something more obsessive and into developing more rigid thought processes about what they should and shouldn't be eating. So it kind of keeps building on each other. So like if, for instance, if they see, oh, bread is this many calories, it's too much, I'm just going to cut that out. And then they may start cutting out bread or something like that. And then that can lead into the next thing they cut out. And then as soon as you know it, all they're eating are low-cal meals or nothing at all.
A cycle Maple fell into at 16.
When I was sick, MyFitnessPal was my best friend. I used that app all the time, and I tracked everything I ate and made sure I didn't go over a certain amount of calories. And if I went over that amount of calories, oh my God, the world was over. My day was ruined. And when I was lifting, I also used MyFitnessPal, and I decided that the number that MyFitnessPal gave me was the number that was good for me, and that it knew better than what my actual body knew and needed.
So why continue to hurt your body and, in some cases, watch yourself wither away? Many people would assume the red flags are too great to ignore, except O'Brien says eating disorders like anorexia actually affect brain functioning.
And the problem, too, is when you get more and more malnourished, so let's say you cut more and more calories, your brain, the functioning of your brain is at a deficit, meaning you're not thinking clearly anymore because your body's not getting enough food. So when you're not thinking clearly anymore, you're being more rigid and you're making choices that aren't necessarily benefiting your health, like you're choosing not to eat. So it's not just that malnourished brain is making poor decisions. So that's what can really escalate eating disorders.
When you are so that deep into a mental disorder such as an eating disorder, anorexia, you put it off. You kind of know in the back of your mind that you're unhealthy, you're sick, you're not doing good, but you never really face it. You kind of suppress it. You kind of just suppress it back in your subconscious and you don't deal with it. But there was this one time in particular, where I think I was toasting something in the toaster or making a smoothie. I don't even remember what I was doing. I was doing something in the kitchen, and my mom just came upstairs, and I was in a tank top, and she just looked at me, and she just started crying. She just started bawling her eyes out, and she was like, "You need help, Julia. Like, if you don't get help right now, like, I'm going to send you somewhere." And I think in that moment, and then my dad even chimed in and just like, "You look sick. This is not good. Like, we need to get you help. And if you don't get help, we're going to get it for you. We're going to force that help on you because you're literally slowly dying. You do not look well."
Maple began her recovery a few weeks later. She chose to do it all by herself so that she could remain in control. And control is a big motivator of eating disorders, according to O'Brien. Maple surrounded herself with supportive friends and family, but recovery was harder than she expected. She hadn't been working out, so she started exercising, figuring a switch would help her out.
But I feel like that kind of got tied into making things a little bit worse. I became kind of obsessed with lifting, and I was just really obsessed and still had that control mindset where I had to, look a certain way and lift at this time every single day or my day wasn't going to go good.
Even though it took more time than she expected, a couple of years, Maple eventually realized what it would take to truly get better.
And I think I just realized one day I took it upon myself to step out of my comfort zone and get uncomfortable and eat more. And I stopped going to the gym 5 to 6 times a week like I thought I had to. Like, I was strict in my mind if I didn't go to the gym 5 times a week. Like, all my favorite fitness influencers, because I follow people on Instagram, and I would see that they go to the gym this many times a week and they hit legs 3 times a week. So then I have to do that too, and that's just so not how it is. Everyone's different and everyone's goals are different.
While Maple was able to help herself, O'Brien and Rowan encourage anyone suffering with an eating disorder to reach out to a professional. And even though it's possible a diet app can trigger an eating disorder in some people, Rowan says treatments often include a different form of food tracking apps. They focus on switching the user's mindset around food by also tracking emotions and cognition.
The point here is that fixation to this kind of detail can get somebody really fixated in an app, and this could be kind of a tool that can be used in a maladaptive way. So none of this stuff is necessarily all good or all bad. It's just like, who's it good for and who's it not good for.
It's important that people are as self-aware as possible and really listening to themselves and why. Why do they want to lose this weight? I think this pattern of using these apps can get you kind of a little obsessional circle, and it's important to take a step outside of that and ask yourself, like, why am I really doing this? And if there seems to be something problematic in that, then it's time to reach out to somebody for help who can support you in living your healthiest life. So if somebody is having issues with eating, they really need to be seeing a nutritionist. They really need to be seeing a therapist, and they really need to be seeing a medical doctor to help them. And they should not ever be relying solely on an app for this, especially MyFitnessPal.
You can find more information about eating disorders and treatment at nationaleatingdisorders.org. You can find more about all of our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. For more behind the scenes, search Radio Health Journal on Facebook and Instagram. Our writer-producer this week is Kristen Farah. I'm Reed Pence. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
On average, annually, diamond exports are about $3 billion a year from Russia.
The diamonds that are helping fund Russia's war.
Then why haven't we found a cure for a common disorder that makes people aggressive and reckless?
It's a huge problem, and I'm always appalled by the fact that no one seems to care.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
What we need people to really think about is how can they build the skills that they need to maintain their emotional well-being for the long term.
Shifting from reactive care to preventative care in the mental health space. Then,
at this point, I think as prices continue to rise, we have to make more choices of things that we're going to buy, and more often, what are we going to live with a little longer than we might used to.
The financial squeeze of inflation. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.